Anyways, so just like to start off with a few questions, and the first one is actually I think for Onodera-san, which is at the end of last year, Japan had an election and a change in government, and as you mentioned, you saw that many of the policies and results that he saw was formulated under the previous government. So, is there any? Is there anything you can mention about potential? So yeah, anything you mentioned about any changes or any new policies that you see coming through from the new government?
I think I think in terms of basic position, there is a very big difference between the Democratic Party, which was saying that they want to completely phase out nuclear, as opposed to the LDP, which firmly believes that nuclear has a place, although maybe reduced than initially thought. So there is a very big difference between the basic position. But in actuality, I don't think what they do is that different. The Democratic Party probably would have had to restart some of the nuclear plants in the short to medium term, mainly because the gas prices and fuel prices would have gone up, and electricity prices are already starting to go up. So if left to its course, it would have gone up, and they would have had to restart at least some of the nuclear power plants. On the other hand, even if the LDP wants to restart all of the nuclear power plants immediately, it cannot do so unless the safety is rechecked. And they will not be able to restart all of the nuclear power plants in any case, mainly because of public sentiment against nuclear. So at the end of the day, while there are very, very divergent differences in positions, what they actually do on the ground would be a nuanced result, which does not differ in a huge way. I think I agree that in the long term, renewable energy is the way to go. Having said that, for Japan, nuclear remains a viable option, at least in the short to medium term, or at least one of the options. One of the key, I think, learnings that we found from the nuclear power plant and the tsunami, earthquake, etc., is that actually putting your eggs into one basket is not a good idea. And we probably tried to put not all of our baskets, but a lot of our eggs into one basket, i.e. nuclear, which was a bad idea. Having said that, saying, okay, we don't want to have coal because it emits CO2. We don't want to have nuclear because it might be unsafe. If we put all of our baskets into renewable energy and gas and oil at this point in time, we don't think that that is a good idea either. And actually, if you have been following some of the papers, actually coal power plants may be built again in Japan, as opposed to the situation before the tsunami and earthquake. Thank you.
Anyone else care to comment? Okay. Okay. So the next one is, Tim, you in your presentation you talked a bit about differences in the Japanese energy market, but does anyone else have any other potential ideas? I mean, we saw, for example, in Onodera-san's presentation, one difference is that you have essentially two different grids that cannot be tied together easily. Is there any other, as you looking at the market, any other kind of unique properties? Sure.
In any market we go into, we have to take a look to see what the differences are in the policies, regulations, and because part of our technologies are related to wireless technologies. There's the wireless regulatory issues. So we have energy issues, wireless regulatory issues. Those are not the same government bodies, so we end up talking to a lot of people. Interesting in Japan, and this may be of interest for anyone who tries to sell new products into Japan, on the metering side, there used to be some Japanese-specific standards. Again, Japanese meter vendors work with Japanese utility companies, which are very large. Some of the largest utilities in the world are in Japan by assets or number of meters and customers. So they actually worked to have their own standards, which worked for them for a very long time. Now, transitioning to more an international set of standards is an effort. And it's an effort for other people trying to break into the market, but it's effort for the Japanese meter vendors and the Japanese utilities to transition. So there are these kinds of things, you know, it seemed kind of a very basic level, like meter standard data formats. It turns out that's a big deal in how quickly you can roll out the smart grid across a very large region like the TEPCO service region. So there's a lot of small things that make up that decision for us. I'm not sure on the solar side or in other markets, kind of how those things play out though.
Anyone? Yeah.
Actually, I think that is a very important point. In terms of who was the driver of technology in the power sector? In Japan, the power companies, TEPCO, KEPCO, were the drivers. Hitachi, Toshiba, etc., actually produced equipment to power the power sector according to the standards that were provided by TEPCO and KEPCO, etc. On the other hand, if you look at the US, actually there are so many power companies in the US, 3,000 if you count all of the municipal utilities and etc., that actually even the biggest, PG&E for example is probably one of the biggest, they cannot really dictate what GE or Siemens provides them. And so I think in the US there is a much more affinity to try and reduce costs also. And also I think there was a bigger push to reduce costs in the US as opposed to Japan. And so those two things actually led is a very big difference between Japan and US. Although I think in Japan some of the emphasis might be changing.
I'll just talk a little bit about the different angle in terms of differences between Japan and US, and this is more from the consumer side. We visited Japan. We visit Japan every 3 months, and on the last trip, what I noticed was that all the buildings in Japan, they had taken off every other light bulb, and they had shut off the hand dryers in the restrooms because essentially there was sort of an edict that you had to cut down the energy usage by about 10%. So and they had cranked up the thermostats as well. So it was really uncomfortable, not only for the visitors but also for the people working in the building. In the U.S., you would have tried to solve this problem perhaps in a different way, maybe technology, etc. But in the Japan side, there was sort of a feeling of, no, we should go ahead and do a national sacrifice. Everybody should be they should be seen as we are sacrificing because of the nuclear disaster. And our point was, well, we've got to help increase the renewable side. We got to help bring technologies like Enlighted, which can go reduce the thing. But there, instead of fighting competitors, you're fighting with the spirit of sacrifice. So, small.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. Actually, my wife's Japanese, and we were in Japan a couple years ago, and she found a advertisement in the local newspaper for a hand-powered washing machine. And it was something that you would actually put your underwear in, which probably no American family would ever buy. But this gives you an idea of the amount of sacrifice.
One thing that I've heard quite a bit is that, especially from industry, is that self-generation is increasing in Japan from industry. And if the trends in Japan follow the trends in Germany, which is what I believe, pretty soon you're going to see millions of businesses and also millions of homes self-generating solar, because homes cannot do wind or whatnot. So the whole architecture of energy is undergoing a radical shift from centralized to distributed, from stupid to smart, from basically the landline model in the telephone industry to the cell phone model that we have today, where anyone can generate, anyone can store energy. And I think that's what's going to happen over the next few years. And I think that's inevitable, not because it's the green thing, but because it's the green thing. I mean, when people can save self-generating, they will. And unless there is a regulatory reason, meaning unless the utilities find a way to push the government to basically negate the possibility of self-generation, it's going to happen, and it's going to happen very soon. So the utility business model altogether is going to change radically over the next few years.
That's an interesting point. Certainly, if you look at the history of computer networking, we've seen distributed networks have taken over the computer networking area, and there's a lot of interest in electricity networks. Is my understanding? Oh, please. My understanding is that Japan was designed primarily to be a very centralized network, based on continuing use of nuclear power. But do you see movement towards allowing a more distributed, sometimes called microgrid type of energy?
I wouldn't say it's that strong yet, but it's true that actually cogeneration and self-generation already was a pretty big thing in Japan even before the earthquake and tsunami. As of 2010, there was 20.23 gigawatts, or 67 terawatt hours of energy, which is about 6% of the power, was actually self-generated or co-generated. The reason is a lot of the chemical companies, petroleum companies, kind of energy-intensive industries actually found that the power is quite expensive, and so they would rather either import coal or gas, as the case may be, and generate themselves. Well, they wouldn't import gas; they actually buy gas. But in any case, so there already was a significant amount of cogeneration, self-generation facilities. And actually, right after the tsunami and earthquake, there was a very big push to try and get them to generate more, to take up some of the slack, so to speak. And also there also has been a renewed policy push to try to promote cogeneration and self-generation. And according to some of the figures that are coming out, as of 2030, they are trying to increase the self-generation, cogeneration from 20 gigawatts to 36 gigawatts, so about double. So they are trying to increase that. At the same time, as I said, if the reforms that are planned, i.e. full retail competition, wholesale market competition, etc., they come into play, they will facilitate self-generation and cogeneration. Because in terms of regulatory framework, there is regulations that try to allow self-generation companies to sell back to the utility. The utility does not really want to buy this power, and so they don't want to promote that much. So because of the power kind of balance, it oftentimes it's very difficult for the utility to get the utility to buy the power at a desired price. So probably as these wholesale markets, retail market, etc., comes into play, it will become much easier. Yeah.
So I've got one more question, and then we'll open up to the audience. So please think of what you'd like to ask. But given this changing environment, do you see any particular areas where North American companies might be having interesting technologies, or that could actually be useful or interesting in the Japanese market?
So I'll give you my biased answer.
Cubotics and enlightened. Yes.
How do you know?
He's not paying me. Anyone? So let me add something to what you're saying, because a lot of the talk is about technology and technology innovation, and I agree that we still need to do a lot of R&D and a lot of technology innovation, especially in the electricity storage side. However, at this point, I think that the most important innovations are business model innovations and financial innovation. We can cut the cost of solar by half just by shifting the dial on interest rates. That's huge. So again, if the regulatory framework allows for new ways to finance energy that don't come from the banks themselves, then there are opportunities for companies, say Solar City. So you know Solar City? Solar City is a new kind of utility. They finance, they put on your rooftop, they manage it for you, has nothing to do with PG&E. Just like Solar City, there's Longevity, Clean Power Finance, Sunrun, they're all here in the Bay Area. These are all about business model innovation. It's not about technology innovation. Does that make sense? So I think that some of the great opportunities right now in Japan, just like here, is in business model innovation. And if there aren't the Solar Cities and the Sunruns and the Longevities of the world, there should be. Because the big utilities and the big banks are not going to be the ones that are going to make this happen. I'll give you another example of the type of company that I think is going to change energy: crowdfunding. So we know crowdfunding. Many of us have done Indiegogo, or we've given $50 for a documentary X, Y, or Z. But recently, last year actually, with the new Jobs Act from the Obama administration, it allowed, so far, crowdfunding has been such that we can't get interest. We can't make money on our money. We could get our money back, but no more than that. So because of the Jobs Act, it changed the law so that citizens can invest, say, in a solar power plant and get money back. So in the US, even now, the cost of capital for solar is still very expensive, especially on the equity side, because of the way that the tax equity law is structured and all that. And that goes into double digits, the cost of equity. So there's a company here, for instance, in Oakland, that came out as a result of the Jobs Act, where you can invest directly in a solar power plant and make interest on that, or the equivalent of interest. Now, even in the US, we're making 1% on our bank account. I mean, in Japan, 0%, or maybe even -%, right? So with a crowdfunding company like Mosaic, or I assume that others are going to pop up, they already lowered the cost of funding a solar company from double digits to 6%, in the latest round to 4%. Now, would I invest to get 4% back in a solar power plant if my alternative was 1% with Wells Fargo, or actually Stanford Federal Credit Union? Was that? So yes, I will put $1,000 or $10,000 into a solar power plant. I mean, the data that we're getting back from Solar City is that 99.5% of people pay for their electricity. I mean, nobody doesn't pay for electricity, right? So if you have a 99% plus chance of getting your money back and make 4-6% return, I will do it. And my guess is that a lot of people will put in $1,000, $10,000 and whatnot. And that in and of itself will drive the cost of solar, which means more installations, which means even lower cost of capital and so on. So again, to your question, I think that at this point, what we need is business model innovation and financial model innovation. And in my opinion, that is what's going to drive clean energy from now on. It's business model innovation. Yeah.
I'll make a quick, I'll take your question, sort of second part, corollary, which is what should US companies do to succeed in Japan? Okay. And I think, a lot of Silicon Valley companies have failed in Japan because they don't understand the channel to go to market. And I think that's really key. Trying to go it alone, trying to go out there and say, hey, I'm going to go directly sell to the utility, or I'm going to directly deploy the solar system, or directly go into the building owner and deploy this, it's not going to work. You're going to break your head, you're going to lose a lot of investor money, and you're going to come back. I think the way to do it is, Tim mentioned very well about how they did this with Hitachi, for example. But figuring out a channel partner, figuring out maybe a couple of channel partners, but going the channel direction is the right way to essentially for the US companies to go succeed in Japan.
In terms of area that I think US is ahead a lot. One is power markets. So as I said, in Japan there isn't a really good, well-working power market in Japan. In the US, power markets have been in place in PJM, etc., for a long time. And so companies that are related into creating the market and how to do the software, etc., they probably, if they can find the right partner in Japan, they will not be able to get the deal themselves, of course, looking at how the government works, etc. But if they can find a good partner in Japan, they would be able to do a good partnership, I think. Second is meter data management systems, demand response, all of that kind of area that is behind the meter. That part probably also will have to be revamped. I agree that Japanese utilities tend to have the tendency, they want to do it their own way. They have their legacy system, they want it. How they can change that, I don't know. But having said that, I think they do have to probably change. And so that second area, again, you probably do need to have a good partner, be it the Hitachi, be it Toshiba, be it Fujitsu, NEC, etc. So there are a number of companies probably that are good potential partners there. A third area is renewable energy integration. Renewable energy, although I totally agree that it's a viable technology, but having said that, it has its intermittency. And unfortunately, solar thermal is not really a very good viable option in Japan because it does not have get good direct sunlight as opposed to California or Spain. So PV remains the good solar option for Japan. And in that case, intermittency is going to remain. So renewable energy integration is going to be a very big challenge that Japan faces. And I think, if I understand correctly, San Diego Gas and Electric, some of the US utilities are already facing problems that I think Japan will face in the coming years. And so companies that are related to that area also will be quite promising. Thank you.
Just one thing I'd like to point out is I think what ties all of those answers together is something that we know a bit about here, and that's software. And number crunching and other types of things that, if you look at all the different things, those are areas that you, particularly companies here in the Valley, have quite a bit of experience with. It just will be a different area.